The desert wind howled outside as Connor sat by the fire in his small outpost, watching the stars move across the dark sky. He lived alone on the edge of a dead planet, surviving by trading scrap and buying food from shady black market suppliers. Tonight, he was waiting for one thing: fresh meat. Nothing special, just protein packs to keep his body alive. Then he heard it. A heavy thud echoed from outside. Something big had landed on the steel porch. Connor stood, grabbed his blaster, and walked toward the door. His boots crunched on the dusty floor as he stepped outside. A metal cargo box, still hissing with steam, sat just in front of his door. The shipping tag blinked red. Confirmed delivery. Class 9 biological material? That was strange. Was usually Class 3. Connor frowned and scanned the box with his wrist device. The signature matched his order. He muttered, "This must be a mistake." Reached for the latch and opened the heavy lid, and then he froze. Inside, curled up like an animal, was a young alien girl. Naked. Her body was thin, her skin glowing a soft silver blue. Chains wrapped around her wrists and ankles. Her wide, glowing eyes locked onto his hand. She trembled. She wasn't dead. She was breathing, chest rising fast, afraid. Connor stepped back, heart racing. "What the hell?" The girl tried to speak, but only let out a soft cry. She didn't understand his words. She didn't know where she was. She crawled back in the box like she thought he would beat her. Connor looked down and realized this wasn't meat. This was trafficking. Someone had sold him a living being. He dropped to one knee, slowly reaching into the box with open hands. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "Do you understand?" She flinched, but didn't move away. Tears slipped from her shining eyes. Connor saw the barcode burned into her shoulder. It read, "Property, livestock, Class 9. His hands curled into fists. He hated this system. He had seen cruel things before. People sold for parts. Animals turned into experiments. But this was different. This girl wasn't just a victim. She was being hunted. Not much he could feel. Connor stood, looked up at the sky. Supply drones still circled the planet. They might have cameras. If they saw her, they would report it. He had to move. He picked her up carefully. She was so light, like she hadn't eaten in days. She didn't fight him. Maybe she was too weak. Or maybe she saw something in his eyes, something that said she was safe. Inside, he laid her on his bed and covered her with a blanket. She curled into it instantly, her thin fingers clutching the cloth like it was treasure. Connor turned off all the lights, shut the security system, and disabled outgoing. Signals no one could know she was here. For hours, he sat beside her watching her sleep. She didn't speak. But sometimes she made small noises, soft whimpers, sharp breaths, the sound of someone who had been hurt too many times. Connor's chest burned with anger. Who did this? Who thought this was okay? He scanned her barcode with his device. File. Opened. It said, "Experimental Hybrid Unit for B. Shipment status. Sold. Condition. Acceptable for consumption testing." His hands shook. They were going to eat her. Suddenly a quiet voice broke the silence. "Please, don't. Return me." Connor looked down. Her lips barely moved, but she had spoken. In broken words, in fear, "I won't," he said quickly. "You're safe here." Her eyes closed again, but now there was something else in them, something small and fragile. Hope Connor stood and locked the doors tight. Whoever sent her here wasn't done. Someone out there wanted her gone, silenced, erased. He had just made an enemy, and he didn't care, because no one human or alien deserved to be treated like this. Tomorrow, he would find out where she came from. Tonight, he would protect her, even if it meant war. The night passed slowly. He sat in the corner of the room, his blaster across his lap, eyes fixed on the girl lying in his bed. Fire had died out, but he didn't light it again. The heat could attract drones. Everything was quiet except the sound of her soft breathing. For now, she was calm, wrapped in his old blanket, looking more like a sleeping child than someone who had been shipped in a box like a product. He couldn't stop thinking about the words. It's burned into her skin. Property. Livestock. Class 9. It made his blood boil. How could any living being be called meat? Who had the power to make that decision? Connor had seen many wrong things in his life, but this one was worse than all. When the sun began to rise and the sky turned red with dust, Connor walked to the storage room. He pulled out his old medical kit, one he hadn't touched in years. She needed help. Food, water, and healing. He didn't even know her species, but he could at least clean her wounds and bring her back to health. He returned to the room slowly, not wanting to scare her. She was awake now, sitting up with the blanket wrapped tightly around her body. Her glowing eyes followed his every move. She didn't speak, but he could see the fear still sitting inside her. Connor sat down across from her, opened the kit, and held up the antiseptic spray. "This might sting," he said softly. Not sure if she understood. She didn't move, but when he gently touched her arm, she flinched. "It's okay," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." She nodded once. Just a small, frightened nod. He cleaned the burn marks on her shoulder, the chain bruises around her ankles, and the small cuts on her back. Her body was covered in marks that told a story of pain, but she never cried. Not once. Only silence, and those wide, glowing eyes. Connor left her for a few minutes and returned with a bowl of hot broth. It wasn't much, just a survival meal made from powdered stock. But the moment she smelled it, her stomach growled loudly. He handed it to her. She stared at it like it was gold. Slowly, she took the spoon and brought it to her lips. Her hands trembled as she ate. She finished the bowl fast, then held it out again, asking without words. He gave her more when she finished the second bowl. She finally spoke again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely more than breath. Connor smiled a little. Was the first time she looked more alive than broken. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She looked confused. He tapped his chest. "Connor." Then pointed at her. She hesitated, then placed her hand on her chest. "Niraya," he nodded. Niraya. It was a beautiful name, strange and soft. Now that she was talking, he tried asking her more. Where was she from? Who did this to her? Why was she sent to him? But she couldn't explain. Her words were broken, her eyes filled with frustration. She touched her head, then her throat, as if something inside was stopping her from saying too much. He understood. She had been silenced, maybe by trauma, or maybe by design. Some species had voice blockers implanted. Maybe hers did too. Later, while she rested, Connor went outside with his scanner. He needed to check if the drone systems had recorded her arrival. If they had, time was running out. The scanner beeped. A surveillance drone had passed by just 10 minutes before he opened the box. The footage was probably already sent to the network. That meant someone knew the package had been delivered. They might not know she was still alive, but they would. Come back to check. He cursed under his breath. He couldn't stay here anymore. When he returned, Niraya was sitting on the floor, watching a small screen showing a desert storm. Her face was calm now, but he knew she understood the danger. He walked up to her. "We have to leave." She tilted her head, not fully understanding. He opened a drawer, pulled out an old datapad, and showed her a picture of a small spaceship. She stared at it, then slowly nodded. Connor began packing. Weapons, medical supplies, food rations, heat. Geary gave Niraya some old clothes, loose but clean. She didn't say much, but she tried to help. As night came again, they stood by the hidden door under the floor. Connor pressed a button, and a hidden elevator took them down into the cave where his ship was buried. The ship was old, rusted in places, but it still worked. Niraya stared at it with wide eyes. She placed her hand on the side of the hull. Something about it felt familiar to her. She stepped forward and whispered something in her language. Connor turned to her. "You've seen this ship before?" She said nothing, but her fingers traced a symbol on the metal. It was not human. It was something older. Connor felt a chill run down his spine. What had he gotten himself into? This girl wasn't just a victim. She was part of something much bigger. And now, So was he. Asterisk. The ship hummed to life in the cave, old engines growling like a beast waking from a long sleep. Connor ran his fingers across the control panel, checking fuel levels and power cores. Dust fell from the ceiling as the engines warmed up. The ship was ready to fly, barely, but enough to get off this cursed rock. Naraya sat silently in the co-pilot seat. She kept looking behind her as if she felt something was coming. Her body was tense, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. She was scared. Connor understood. He was scared too. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. It's not just the girl, not just the way she had been delivered, but something deeper. Like a hand was moving pieces on a board he couldn't see. He lifted the ship slowly, dust rising as the landing gear pulled in. The cave opened through a narrow crack that led into the dry night sky. As the ship rose, the scanners lit up. Warning. Lights flashed across the panel. The ship was entering the atmosphere, and it wasn't friendly. Connor cursed. They had come faster than expected. Someone had watched the drone feed. They knew. He pushed the throttle forward and the ship shot through the rocky path and into the air. Naraya gasped as the engines roared. The stars above them grew closer. Then a loud voice crackled over the comms. Unauthorized launch detected. You have one chance. Turn the cargo or be destroyed. Connor didn't answer. He reached for that jammer switch and cut off communication. Another voice came through a different channel. Darker and colder. You've made a mistake, human. That thing beside you doesn't belong to you. Connor slammed the button again and powered up shields. A blast shook the ship from behind. Naraya screamed and grabbed his arm. Her touch was strong, far stronger than he expected. Connor looked at her, but she was staring at the back of the ship with pure fear. She knew who was following them. The enemy ship came into view, sleek black, covered in strange symbols. It wasn't a normal bounty hunter vessel. This was military, or worse. Designed for fast strikes and clean retrievals, Connor pulled the ship into a sharp dive toward the rocky canyons below. Lasers lit up the night behind them, slicing through the air. He moved fast, dodging blasts with practiced hands. Naraya held on, her breathing fast, her body shaking. They dipped under a stone bridge, then turned sharply into a narrow canyon. The enemy followed, not losing speed. Connor flipped a hidden switch near his seat. The ship's old defense system activated, dropping mines from the back. One of them exploded near the pursuing craft, throwing it off for a moment. That was all he needed. He punched the engine and broke through the atmosphere into the upper sky. The stars welcomed them like old friends. But they weren't safe yet. Connor set the coordinates for a hidden station in the drift zone. It's a place where no laws existed and questions were never asked. As they left the planet behind, Naraya finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it held fear and something more. They want me because I remember. Connor turned to her. Remember what? She looked down at her hands, the voices, the old place, before the chains. He didn't push further. She had seen something they didn't want her to speak about. Maybe they erased her memories, or tried to, but something was coming back. Something they were willing to kill for. Suddenly, the ship shuddered. A tracking beacon had activated. The enemy ship had locked on again. This time, it wasn't alone. 2 more ships entered the radar range. They were moving in fast, and they weren't giving warnings now. Connor gritted his teeth and pushed the ship harder. Ignoring the overheating engines, he opened a secret panel. Beside his seat and pulled out an old device, something illegal and forgotten. A pulse jammer. If he used it, they'd lose all electronics for 60 seconds. It would drop his ship dead in space, but it might kill their lock. He looked at Naraya. She was staring straight ahead, her hands glowing faintly now. He reached for the button. She suddenly placed her hand over his. Double quotes. No, she said. Her eyes changed color, shifting into a bright golden light. Connor backed away slightly. What's happening to you? Naraya stood, walked to the center of the ship, and placed her hands on the metal floor. The ship responded. Lights changed. Systems hummed differently. The engine calmed. The ship no longer felt old. It felt alive. Connor stared in disbelief. She wasn't just a victim. She was connected to this technology in a way no human could understand. Outside, the enemy ships began to lose speed. Her systems were jamming, but not from any human tool. Naraya whispered a word in her language. The ship around them pulsed once with light. The attackers vanished from radar. Connor blinked. "What did you do?" he asked. Naraya sat down again, breathing heavily. "They were listening through the stars. I made them stop." Connor couldn't speak for a moment. This girl, this scared creature sent in a meat box, had just shut down military ships with a whisper. She wasn't just important. She was dangerous. And now he had taken her. He looked at the stars. Hedden knew one thing for sure. He could never go back. Asterisk. The stars stretched endlessly ahead as the ship glided through the void. Connor watched. The blinking controls, but kept stealing glances at Naraya. She sat quietly now, her glowing eyes dimmed back to their soft blue. But something had changed in her. The power she showed during the chase was not just a trick or luck. It was ancient and deep. She held a secret that could shake whole worlds. Connor reached out, hesitating before he spoke. "Naraya, what are you really hiding?" His voice was calm but steady. She looked up, her eyes meeting his with a mix of fear and sadness. "I am not just a girl," she said softly. "I am the last of my kind, a princess of a lost empire. The power you saw is the blood of my ancestors." Connor swallowed hard. A princess. It explained why so many wanted her back so badly. She wasn't just cargo. She was a symbol, a weapon, a hope. She told him stories in broken words about her homeworld, a shining star system swallowed by war. Her family betrayed by those closest to them. She was captured and stripped of everything to be sold as nothing but meat. But the chains on her body could not hold the spirit inside. Connor felt a deep respect growing inside him. This was no ordinary alien. She carried the weight of an entire civilization on her shoulders. And yet she was scared like a child. Suddenly the ship's sensors beeped. The hidden station was near, but more than that, the enemy was still hunting them. Connor activated the stealth mode, the ship's hull shimmering with a faint blue light that bent the stars around it. They would not be seen easily now as they landed on the rocky platform. A group of figures awaited them, not soldiers, but refugees, aliens from many races, each with their own scars and stories. They greeted Naraya like a long-lost queen, bowing and whispering words Connor could not understand. One of the leaders stepped forward, a tall alien with sharp eyes. "You have the blood?" he said, looking at Naraya. "The prophecy says one with fire in her veins will return and bring balance." Connor watched as Naraya's face hardened. She was more than a victim now. She was a warrior. That night, around a flickering fire in a hidden cave, Naraya shared her plan. She would reclaim her throne and free her people from the tyrants who sold her like cattle. But to do that, she needed allies and trust. Connor listened carefully. His world was simple. Survive, avoid trouble, live alone. But now, he was part of something bigger. He would fight by her side, not because of duty, but because he believed in her cause. As the fire crackled, Naraya looked at him and said, "You saved me when no one else would. Now, you must decide. Will you be my protector or my prisoner?"
Connor
smiled, a rare warmth spreading through his chest. "I'm neither. I'm your partner."
out.
The night deepened, and outside the enemy forces grew closer. But inside that cave, a new hope was born. Connor knew this was only the beginning of their journey together. They would challenge an empire and change the fate of the stars. Asterisk, the dawn light spilled softly over the rocky horizon as Connor prepared the ship for departure. The hidden station behind them was a sanctuary, but a temporary one. Naraya stood beside him, dressed now in rough but fitting clothes that hid her glowing skin. Her eyes scanned the star map spread across the table, filled with symbols that Connor could barely understand. Each mark showed a world, a place with history, power, or danger. Connor knew the journey ahead was more than a simple flight. It was a voyage into the heart of an empire that had tried to erase Neriah and everything she stood for. He wondered if they were ready for what lay beyond the stars as they lifted off. The hum of the engines was steady, but Connor felt the weight of every mile they traveled. He glanced at Neriah, who sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the calm before a storm. Suddenly the ship's alarms blared. The sensors detected a fleet large, heavily armed, and moving fast toward their position. Connor's grip tightened on the controls. This was no longer a chase. It was a battle waiting to happen. Neriah's eyes brightened with fierce determination. "They come for blood," she said. "For my blood and yours," Connor smiled grimly. "Then we give them a fight they will never forget." He maneuvered the ship into the asteroid belt, weaving through jagged rocks and debris with skill born from years of survival. The enemy ships followed, firing blasts that shook the hull and sent sparks flying from the console. Neriah closed her eyes and placed her hands on the ship's frame. A soft glow spread from her palms, flowing through the metal like fire. Ship responded, shields strengthening and engines surging with new power. Connor watched in awe. Neriah was not just a passenger, she was the ship's heart. Suddenly the enemy flagship appeared ahead, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. Connor pushed the throttle to maximum and charged. The flagship fired a beam of pure energy. Cutting a glowing line across the ship's side, sparks flew and alarms screamed, but the shields held. Neriah shouted an ancient word, and the ship's weapons responded. Energy beams shot out, striking the flagship's hull. The enemy ship rocked, faltering Toka. Connor seized the moment. He dove toward a narrow gap between asteroids, forcing the enemy to follow. The battle raged on, but Connor and Neriah worked as one, his hands on the controls, her power guiding the ship's systems. Hours passed in a blur of fire and light. Finally, the enemy retreated, damaged but not defeated. They were alive. But the war had only just begun. Neriah turned to Connor. "My people need me. The throne is waiting, but so is danger." Connor nodded. "Then we go home." Together, they set the course for Neriah's lost world, ready to face whatever waited there. The stars were vast, but their resolve was stronger. They would fight for freedom, for justice, and for a future where no one would ever be sold like meat again. The ship broke through the atmosphere with a low rumble, shaking as it descended toward Neriah's home planet. Connor stared out at the vast world below, its swirling clouds and shining cities, a sharp contrast to the lonely rocks they had left behind. This was no longer a simple mission. It was a return to a place filled with memories, danger, and the chance for change. Neriah sat beside him, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. She spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of history and pain. "The council does not want me. They call me broken, useless. They want me forgotten." Connor's heart tightened. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. It was personal. The very people who should have protected her had cast her aside like dirt as the ship landed. In the capital city, guards surrounded them. Their faces were cold, their eyes filled with suspicion. They led Neriah away, ignoring Connor's protests. She was brought before the council. A group of stern-faced elders sitting on a raised platform. The room was cold and filled with whispers. Neriah stood tall, though her hands trembled slightly. The council chief sneered. "You'll claim the throne, but you are a failure, a product of experimentation and exile." Neriah's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm the true heir. The blood of the founders runs through me." The council laughed, but Connor stepped forward. "She survived what you tried to erase. She carries the strength of her people. You cannot deny her." A murmur spread through the room. The council challenged Connor's words, but he held his ground. He knew there was only one way to settle this, a trial by combat. An ancient law that gave the challenger a chance to prove their worth. The champion chosen by the council was a towering warrior. Covered in dark armor and scars from countless battles, he sneered at Connor, clearly seeing him as a weak human. But Connor only smiled. He did not fight for glory, he fought for Naraya's honor. The arena was vast, filled with thousands of watching eyes. The air buzzed with tension. Connor and the champion faced each other, weapons drawn. The fight was brutal. The champion's strength was overwhelming, but Connor's speed and determination kept him alive. Each strike landed with force. Each dodge was a breath away from death. Naraya watched, her heart pounding. She saw something in Connor she had not seen before hope. Finally, with a swift move, Connor disarmed the champion and pressed his blade to the man's throat. The crowd fell silent. Connor looked up at the council. "I fight not for power, but for justice." The chief nodded slowly. The ancient law was honored. Naraya stepped forward, reclaiming her place. She turned to Connor and smiled. "You saved me." Connor shook his head. "No, we saved each other." The crowd erupted in cheers. A new chapter had begun. Together, they would rebuild a kingdom broken by betrayal and fear. The stars outside shone brighter than ever. Their fight was far from over. But now they had allies and hope. The future was theirs to shape Asterisk. The crowd's cheers still echoed in the arena as Naraya and Connor stood side by side. The ancient law had given her back her throne, but the true battle was only just beginning. The scars of betrayal ran deep through the kingdom. Its many powerful enemies still lurked in the shadows. Waiting for a chance to strike, Naraya turned to Connor, her eyes steady and full of resolve. "This is not just my fight anymore. It is ours. Together, we must heal what has been broken." Connor nodded, feeling a strength he had never known before. The lonely scavenger who once cared only for survival had become a protector, a partner, and a symbol of hope. The galaxy was vast, but with Naraya by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with activity. Naraya worked tirelessly to unite the fractured clans and restore peace to her people. Helped where he could, training soldiers and securing alliances with neighboring worlds. Slowly, the kingdom began to breathe again. Yet danger remained. The shadowy forces that had sold Naraya into slavery sent spies and assassins, hoping to undo their victory. One night, as the stars hung low, an attack came. The palace was surrounded by enemy troops, their weapons aimed to kill and destroy. Connor stood at the front line, his blaster ready. Naraya stood beside him, her hands glowing with the same ancient power that had saved them before. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Blasts lit the night sky, screams echoed through the halls, but neither faltered. Together they fought with courage and determination. Naraya's power protected the defenders, while Connor's quick thinking turned the tide. As dawn broke, the enemy retreated, broken and defeated. The victory was hard-won, but it cemented Naraya's rule and united her people like never before. She called for a new council, one that welcomed all voices and races. The old ways of betrayal and cruelty began to fade. One evening, standing on the palace balcony, Naraya looked up at the stars and smiled. Connor joined her, his hand finding hers in the cool night air. "You changed my world," she said softly. "And you changed mine," he replied. "We are stronger together." Their journey from a stolen cargo box to rulers of a reborn kingdom had been filled with pain, struggle, and sacrifice. But through it all, they had found trust, friendship, love. The galaxy watched as a new era dawned, one where no one would be sold like meat, where freedom and hope ruled. And it all began because one man chose to protect an alien girl who was never meant to survive. Their story was a reminder that even in the darkest times, courage and compassion could light the way. Together, they were unstoppable. The stars would remember their names forever, Asterisk.